Welcome to Stuff Works Explained. If you are here for the first time, please consider subscribing to this channel. You can also watch other videos that you have done on different topics. In this video, we'll be talking about the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. In 2 months' time, it will be 1 year since the dam was commissioned. So we'll be asking, 5 years after the first power, is Africa's biggest dam delivering on its promise? For more than a decade, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam GERD has dominated conversations about infrastructure in Africa. Africa's infrastructure aspirations, Nile politics, as well as regional power security. It has been celebrated as Ethiopia's greatest engineering achievement, criticized as a geopolitical flashpoint, as well as watched closely by governments from Cairo and Khartoum. Yet, as the dust from construction begins to settle, a more important question emerges. How is the dam actually performing? This is no longer a story about concrete, steel, or politics of filling the reservoir. It is a story about performance. Has the GERD begun delivering economic transformation Ethiopia promised? Is it producing the electricity that justified its more than $4 billion price tag? Has it changed the regional energy landscape? And what has become of the fears that once dominated negotiations between Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan? Drawing from official statements by Ethiopian authorities, reports from Ethiopian power utility, assessment by international energy analysts, satellite observations of the reservoir, as well as analysis by institutions that monitor the Nile basin, this report examines where Africa's largest hydroelectric power project stands today, not through political rhetoric, but through the lens of project delivery, operational performance, as well as measurable outcomes. This is a project that changed conversation. Fewer infrastructure projects have attracted the level of global attention that Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam GERD has. Constructed on the Blue Nile, approximately 30 to 40 kilometers from Ethiopia's border with Sudan, the dam was conceived as the cornerstone of Ethiopia's long-term economic transformation. With a planned installed capacity of about 5,150 megawatts, although this is not the figure that started with, it was designed to become Africa's largest hydroelectric power station, supplying electricity to millions of Ethiopians while positioning the country as a major exporter of power across East Africa. From the beginning, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam represented far more than an energy project. For Ethiopia, it became a symbol of national self-reliance. Unable to secure significant international financing because of geopolitical concerns surrounding the Nile, the country turned inward. Civil servants contributed part of their salaries, although that has been a concern in some cases. Ordinary citizens bought bonds, and domestic institutions became the backbone of project financing. In project management terms, Ethiopia achieved something few developing countries have attempted at this scale. That is mobilizing domestic capital to deliver a mega project with limited external financial support. That achievement alone deserves recognition. But successful project delivery is measured not only by completing construction. The true measure lies in whether the asset performs as envisioned. Here we see that construction is no longer the story. From an engineering perspective, Ethiopia has crossed its most difficult milestone. The dam structure is substantially complete. The reservoir has been filled to its intended operational level following successful annual filling phases that concluded in 2024 having started in 2020. Satellite imagery analyzed by independent researchers have consistently confirmed reservoir growth, validating official statements that the storage phase had reached its target. The debate has therefore shifted. No serious observer questions whether GERD exists or whether it is operational. That one is clear. The more relevant question is whether it is performing at the level originally promised. That distinction matters because infrastructure projects are evaluated against three different milestones. The first is construction. The second is commissioning, where systems are tested and gradually brought into operation. The third, and arguably the most important, is operational optimization, where the completed asset consistently delivers the outputs for which it was designed. GERD has clearly achieved the first milestone. It has partially achieved the second. The third remains a work in progress. Now, electricity is flowing, but not at full strength. There is a little dispute that GERD is generating electricity. Several generating units have already been commissioned and connected to Ethiopian national grid. Power from the dam is now contributing to domestic electricity supply, representing a major step towards expanding access to energy in a country where demand continues to grow rapidly. However, there's an important decision between generating electricity and operating at full capacity. The dam was designed to produce approximately 5,150 megawatts once all generating units become operational. Publicly available information suggests that only a portion of the plant turbines have been fully commissioned. Ethiopia has announced successful milestones as individual units entered service, but comprehensive operational data showing sustained generation from the full complement of turbines have not been publicly released. That does not necessarily indicate failure. Large hydroelectric projects around the world often require several years between structural completion and full commercial operations, as generating units are commissioned sequentially and transmission systems are strengthened. Even so, expectations surrounding GERD were unusually high. The promise was not simply that electricity would be generated. The promise was that Ethiopia would become one of the Africa's largest leading electricity exporters. That ambition has not yet been fully realized. Now, the grid may be the bigger challenge. Ironically, the dam itself may no longer represent the biggest obstacle. Generating electricity is only part of that energy equation. The second challenge is transmitting the electricity to consumers. Power stations do not create economic value merely by producing energy. They create value when that energy reaches home, factories, as well as export markets. Ethiopia continues investing heavily in transmission infrastructure to strengthen its domestic grid as well as expand cross-border electricity trade with neighboring countries. Without adequate transmission capacity, additional electricity generated by GERD cannot be fully utilized regardless of how effectively or how efficiently the turbine performs. Project managers refer to this as dependency management. A project's success often depends on complementary investments outside the project itself. GERD illustrates this principle perfectly. The dam may ultimately produce its planned capacity, but unless transmission infrastructure grows at a similar pace, part of that generation potential will remain commercially underutilized. Now, a question: has the investment started paying for itself? This remains one of the most difficult questions to answer. GERD reportedly costs more than $4 billion US, making it one of Africa's largest investments in terms of infrastructure. Such projects are never expected to recover their costs immediately. Hydroelectric dams typically generate returns over several decades through electricity sales, industrial developments, as well as regional exports. Nevertheless, investors and policymakers eventually expect measurable commercial performance. At present, Ethiopia has demonstrated that GERD can generate electricity. What has not been demonstrated publicly is sustained operation close to design capacity, accompanied by electricity sales sufficient to validate projects' long-term financial assumptions. Until that happens, the project economic performance should be regarded as still evolving rather than fully proven. That is not unusual. Many large infrastructure assets require years before reaching mature operational performance. The difference is that few projects have carried expectation as high as GERD. Another question: did Egypt's worst fear materialize? Now we can be able to answer that question partially. Perhaps the greatest surprise is what has not happened. Throughout the reservoir filling process, Egypt repeatedly warned that rapid filling could threaten downstream water security. Those concerns shaped years of negotiations involving the African Union, United States of America, as well as international observers. Yet the filling period concluded without the catastrophic disruption that many had feared. Egypt was looking for a prolonged filling, but Ethiopia wanted to fill the dam as quickly as possible. So Ethiopia's wish prevailed. Yet the filling period concluded without much happening as it was feared. Several years of favorable Nile flows helps reduce downstream impact, while Egypt continued managing water through the Aswan High Dam. That should not be interpreted as proof that every concern had disappeared. It is far from over. The real test has simply changed. Future disputes are less likely to focus on filling the reservoir and more likely to center on drought management, something that has not been agreed up to now. If prolonged period of low rainfall occur across Nile Basin, Ethiopia, Sudan, as well as Egypt, these countries may once again find themselves negotiating how available water should be shared. That challenge remains unresolved because the three countries have not yet concluded a legally binding agreement governing long-term dam operations. The engineering debate may be nearing completion. The diplomatic debate is not. Now, what's the missing ingredient in all this? We say, it's said to be transparency. If there is one area where legitimate criticism can be directed at GERD today, it is transparency. Despite the project's significance, detailed operational information remains limited. Independent analysts still rely heavily on official commissioning announcement, satellite observation, as well as external energy assessment to estimate operational performance. Comprehensive public reporting on turbine availability, annual electricity generation, reservoir operating rules, as well as export performance remains limited compared to with many internationally monitored hydropower projects. Transparency matters because it builds confidence. Investors, neighboring countries, researchers, as well as electricity markets all benefit from predictable and verifiable operational information. As GERD matures from a national construction project into a regional energy asset, expectations regarding operations disclosure are likely to grow. Now, let's have the project management verdict. Viewed strictly from a project management perspective, GERD represents an interesting paradox. As a construction project, it has largely succeeded. The physical asset has been delivered despite formidable financial, political, as well as diplomatic problems. As a commissioning project, progress continues. Generating units are entering operation, though the plant has not yet demonstrated sustained performance at its full installed capacity. As a commercial project, the verdict remains open. The ultimate measure will not be the height of the dam or the volume of the water stored, to be whether Ethiopia consistently generates, transmits, and sells electricity at the scale originally envisioned. Only then will the project financial assumptions be fully tested. And now the conclusion. The Grand Ethiopian Rennaissance Dam has already secured its place in Africa's history. It proved that an African nation could mobilize domestic resources to build one of the continent's most ambitious infrastructure projects, despite extraordinary geopolitical constraints. That achievement cannot be dismissed. Yet, infrastructure history is rarely written when ribbon-cutting ceremonies take place. It is written years later when completed projects are judged by how effectively They improve people's lives, strengthen economies, as well as justify the investment that created them. GERD has successfully closed the construction finish line. It has begun the journey towards becoming the regional energy powerhouse Ethiopia envisioned, but it has not reached its final destination. For engineers, the hardest work may be over. For operators, policymakers, as well as electricity markets, the most important phase has only just begun. And that's where GERD's legacy will ultimately be decided, not by the scale of the dam, but by the scale of the transformation it delivers. So thank you for reaching this far. If it's your first time here, please subscribe to this channel. You can also watch other videos that we have done on this topic as well as on other topics. So thank you, and let's meet in the next one.